In the depths of the ancient swamps, hidden from the world by towering trees and fog-choked air, an unsettling presence stirs. For centuries, the elders of nearby villages have whispered tales of something malevolent lurking beneath the murky waters. The creeping slime. Some say it's the remnant of an ancient curse. Others claim it's a forgotten god seeking vengeance. No one knows for certain, but the legends have a chilling consistency. If you hear the slow, slithering sound of the slime, it's already too late. Ethan, a university student studying folklore, had never believed in old myths. He was out in the swamp under the pretense of research, but in truth, it was curiosity, pure, dangerous curiosity, that had brought him here. He had found an old book in the university library, detailing the legend of the creeping slime. It warned that the creature, if disturbed, would awaken and consume anything in its path. But to Ethan, it was just a story, a challenge. He wanted to prove it wasn't real. The air was thick with moisture as Ethan pushed deeper into the swamp, the smell of rotting vegetation overwhelming his senses. His boots squished into the mud with every step, and the faint chirping of insects was the only sound around him. He held a flashlight tightly, its beam piercing through the fog, revealing only more trees and water. His breath quickened as he approached the spot marked on his map, an ancient stone altar, half submerged in the swamp. The villagers had once made offerings here to appease the spirit of the slime, hoping to keep it asleep. But the offerings had stopped generations ago. As he neared the altar, Ethan noticed something odd. The ground seemed slicker than before, as if coated with a layer of thick, gelatinous fluid. He knelt down and touched the ground, pulling his fingers away to find a strange, greenish slime clinging to them. It was cold, and the texture was unlike anything he had felt before. Sticky, yet alive, almost as if it was pulsating with its own heartbeat. A chill ran down his spine, but Ethan shook it off. Just the swamp, he muttered to himself. Nothing more. He pressed on, reaching the altar. The stone was covered in strange carvings, symbols that he couldn't quite decipher. He took out his phone, snapping a few pictures, but something caught his attention. A low, slithering sound from behind him. He turned quickly, flashlight sweeping through the fog, but saw nothing. His heart pounded in his chest as he strained to listen. The sound came again, this time closer, like something thick and wet dragging itself across the ground. Ethan froze. His rational mind screamed that it was just an animal, but deep down, the primal fear began to take over. Slowly, he backed away from the altar, but his boots slipped on the slick ground. He looked down, horrified to see the slime spreading, thick tendrils of it crawling towards him, wrapping around his feet. The slime seemed to have a life of its own, as though it was hunting him. Panic surged through him, and Ethan kicked at the tendrils, trying to break free. But the more he struggled, the more the slime wrapped itself around him. Suddenly, the slithering sound became louder, more insistent, as if the entire swamp was coming to life. The water bubbled. From the dark water, a massive shape began to rise, a shifting, amorphous mass of slime, glowing faintly green in the dim light. It towered above Ethan, its formless body twisting and writhing, and within the slime, Ethan could see faces, distorted, screaming faces of those who had been consumed by it over the centuries. The slime lunged forward, and Ethan barely managed to scramble backward, slipping and falling into the mud. His flashlight dropped into the water, flickering once before going out, plunging him into darkness. He could hear the slime slithering closer, feel its cold presence wrapping around him like a noose. He tried to scream, but the sound was drowned out by the deafening silence of the swamp. In a last-ditch effort, Ethan pulled out the old book he had brought, flipping desperately through its pages for something, anything that could stop the creature. His hands shook as he found a passage about an ancient ritual, an offering to appease the beast. But he had nothing to offer, and the slime was already upon him, crawling up his legs, his arms, until it reached his throat. His breath came in short gasps as the slime began to suffocate him. His vision blurred, and as the world around him faded, he could hear the faint whispers of those who had come before him, swallowed by the same curse. They warned him. They all warned him. And then, silence. The next morning, the swamp was quiet, the fog lifting slightly as the sun rose. But the altar remained, half submerged in the water, the slime slowly retreating back into the depths, waiting for the next curious soul to wander too close. Because the creeping slime never sleeps for long,